So today's conversation is with a colleague of mine called Katie Hart. Now, Katie and I are both tutors and aficionados, if you like, of Cambridge Marketing College. We spend a lot of time with the college in various guises and various roles. And I've been intrigued for quite some time over something that Katie does. And Katie does marketing in a slightly different way to most of us. And I want to hear more about this because I am fascinated as a psychology graduate from many, many moons ago. I've always been kind of fascinated, really, and intrigued by the idea of bringing psychological techniques and thinking and approaches into how we communicate or market, both personally and professionally. But Katie's taken things onto a whole new level with the phrase neuromarketing. And that is what we're going to explore here today. And I want to get some definitions in here. And I want to really understand from Katie kind of really what this means. And actually, as marketers, as communicators, business owners, entrepreneurs, what use is neuromarketing for us? So this is going to be hopefully a deep dive into marketing like you've never known before. So hi, Katie. There's a big pitch. There's a setup for you. Are you up for the challenge here?
I'm always up for the challenge, Neil. Bring it on.
So for anybody who doesn't know you, obviously some of my regulars obviously know quite a bit about Cambridge Marketing College because I do a lot of kind of touch points there that talk about the college and the various things. But if anybody hasn't encountered you, do you want to give a little bit of a background to who you are, kind of how you're involved with the college and all the other kind of stuff that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my involvement at the college is, well, as you say, it's been going on for a few years now. But I've been the course leader for the distance learning students who are doing the Chartered Institute of Marketing certificate qualification. I'm the tutor on the customer insights module for that as well, and I'm also a tutor for the level 3 apprentices who do the marketing assistant apprenticeship. So yeah, I mean, all sorts of other things that we pick up along the way as well. But those are the core ways that I'm regularly involved with the college. Outside of the college, I run my own business, which is called Katie Hart Limited. And yes, as you say, my business is in the exciting field of neuromarketing. It's quite a new field. It's a very fast-paced, very it's very well tipped for growth and for being one of the key trends within marketing over the next few years. So it feels like a lovely place to be. Shall I tell you what it is?
I
I
was
know
going to
you
say,
said you were keen for a
sounds
definition.
right place at the right time, but I want to know what it is because the word neuro kind of, it just to me kind of, it conjures up a whole bunch of things from perception to cognition to just brain power to influence to there's a whole bunch of stuff. But I want you to clarify that for me because I don't want to get this thing wrong because I think going forward, if this is a thing, I need to know more about it.
Oh, it's definitely a thing. Don't worry. You're right. I mean, yes, the neuro in neuromarketing comes from neuroscience. So, in its broadest term, that's the study of our nervous system. Most of what we do, though, is actually focus that on the core part of our nervous system, which is actually our brain and the functions that are taking place within our brain. So, as you rightly say, it's those functions of things like perception, attention, memory, language, decision making, all those cognitive functions that you no doubt studied so much in psychology. But it's really understanding the brain processes behind it. So it's looking at a neurological level at what's going on in the brain. So what is it that drives our behaviors and what is it that drives those decision-making processes, and enabling us to use fundamental techniques in neuroscience to actually interrogate and understand those. And I think that's why it's really starting to gain a big momentum now, is because if you think back, 100 years, if you wanted to know what was going on inside somebody's brain, there was very little option for actually how you would do that. I mean, it's if you manage to get a live brain on the table in front of you, it doesn't reveal anything. It's not like a heart that pumps or lungs that expand and deflate. And actually, it doesn't show you anything about how it's working or how hard it's working or how healthy it is. It doesn't tell us much at all. So historically, if people wanted to work out what was going on in the brain, they would literally drill through the skull and poke around a bit and see what they could do, see if they could influence something to change for that individual. Or I'm afraid that actually quite often we were ambulance chasers, and we would wait for somebody to have an accident or an illness that may have completely taken away functioning in part of their brain. And from that, we would start to plot and understand what that particular area of the brain was doing. Thankfully, we no longer have to do that. Due to huge advances in technology, we can actually now watch the brain at work. We can see it in real time. We can interrogate what specific pathways within the brain are actually involved in the intricate processes that it takes place in on a day-to-day basis. And so when we look at all of this and we apply it to marketing materials and marketing collateral, it gives us a fantastic opportunity to see at a very physiological level the way the brain is responding to what is presented to it or what is going on around it.
This sounds like... the reason I do that is kind of it sounds like in the right hands, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. Question mark though, in the wrong hands, this sounds like, and I'm going to use the word, potential manipulation.
Yes, yeah. I mean, there is a big ethical debate that goes on. You're right in terms of what we know and what we understand. It has power. It does have real power. I think of it, I mean, in terms of my interests, I'm very clear on where my ethical boundaries lie. I'm not interested in manipulating people in the same way I don't want to be manipulated. I am happy with influence. And I think within the marketing industry, we are always trying to influence people. We are always trying to influence their loyalty to a particular brand, or influence them to try something new, or to give us their email addresses, or to subscribe, or to hit like. We are often trying to influence that behavior. And so when I apply neuromarketing, I'm just using different, far more powerful techniques to create those influences, but I don't want to be manipulating people. And most of us in marketing don't want people to feel that they have been manipulated or coerced into doing something that they genuinely don't want to do. That's not how you build successful businesses and brands. It's not a model that will work for long.
Because it was one of those original challenges, I think, when NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, came through as a thing. It almost became a fad. And I know there's lots of very, very interesting and good techniques that emerged from that kind of back in the day that are still prevalent in lots of ways that we communicate, and that we kind of understand that sort of relationship with others, both professionally and personally. But I think back in the day, a lot of the challenges there were, but if you're doing it and I don't know you're doing it, that even at an ethical level is actually still a very fine line to be treading. And I guess with a lot of the stuff that you've kind of researched, and I want to come on to some of the stuff that you've been directly and actively involved in a minute, but I guess there is that kind of fine line to tread, isn't there? It's okay kind of knowing and understanding something, but then from your perspective, is it more about I know this stuff about this person I'm trying to influence, but actually I'm going to do it in this way based on that knowledge. I'm not going to kind of push it too far. I mean, how do you kind of decide how much is enough or how much is appropriate? It's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a tricky one. I think the first thing to say is we aren't at the stage that we can do it on an individual level. So very often when we're doing the research, what we're doing is bringing participants in and finding out the average response. So it's not going to be the case that anything that we do, we can categorically say with guarantees will work, will influence people in a particular way. But yes, I mean, you're right. There is this huge sort of ethical debate about where you stop. And I know within the industry, there are lots of people who won't work with sectors such as tobacco or any brands that are encouraging underage drinking and things like that, just because what we can do is right on that cusp of actually influence and manipulation. And what we want to do is make sure that we are using it for good and for the right reasons, and to if we can use it more in line with encouraging people to live more healthy lifestyles, or things that are actually going to be beneficial to them and to society in general, rather than sort of pursuit of profit, I suppose.
It's an interesting one because there's a crossover here then between some of the stuff I'm directly involved in this whole kind of marketing sustainability thing, to coin a very, very broad phrase, and actually what you're doing at a well, sort of a communications level. It feels like where there is that crossover, it's almost like the world is now ready for some, and we don't want to bog this down in bureaucracy and kind of red tape, and you can't do this and you can't do that. Do you think it's kind of more about sort of self-regulation, and that people will actually see through the brands who maybe do, jump onto this opportunity and sort of think, yes, big profits to be made from really pushing the boundaries? Do you think this kind of self-regulation thing where people say, oh no, hold on, that is too far, everybody will get it, we'll lose customers if we try and push this too far? Do you think that's going to happen, or do you feel that there's almost like a government kind of level thing where the law comes down on this and says, right, these are the rules, this is how we're going to police it? Do you think it's a more self-regulated thing here?
Certainly at the moment, I feel as though it is that self-regulation. There are codes of conducts and things that you can adhere to, but there is no prescriptive outline of where limits and boundaries are. Having said that, when you rely on self-regulation, we are all going to have different senses of what is acceptable and what feels right and what feels comfortable and ethical for us within our own businesses. So I would expect at some point those boundaries will be put in place. But I think actually when we look at it and when we think about what's going on here, we aren't going to be able to persuade somebody to do something they don't want to do. So we aren't in the realm of being able to hypnotize people into buying something that they may never have had any intention of purchasing before in their life. So, the power that we have is within the narrow confines of how we can capture people's attention. So that's something that we can influence. But if, having caught their attention, what we're promoting is irrelevant to them or isn't of interest to them, they will move on. They will, naturally their environment will be busy and noisy like all of ours is, and they will move on to the next thing. So it's not something that we can use to really manipulate people and to get them to buy things that are completely out of their realm or that are never going to be relevant or of interest to them. So we aren't in that situation. It's very much about how we optimize the communications we do have so that within our audience and the people we're engaging with and talking with, we can have that stronger sense of connection and we can really stand out from our competitors.
I'm loving that. That's the bit. And I always look out for the little short clip, the little short form video I can take out of this and say, right, there's the promotional piece as to why you should listen to this message. Because there it is. I think absolutely there it is. So the way you're defining that then is that this is kind of, it's almost about being a smart communicator and a smart marketer, rather than saying, right, this is one thing you can do and suddenly you control the world. That's not what this is about then. So this is about a level of granularity, if you like, in terms of the detailed understanding of your customer, if we just focus on customers to start with. So this makes us smarter marketers. This makes us more observant, better insights. Is that kind of the right way to sort of approach this? Almost like this is a new layer of marketing understanding in terms of the customer.
Absolutely it is. And I think that analogy of the new layer is really powerful because, well, if you look at the statistics, we spend a lot of money on market research, and yet still there is a very high proportion of new businesses and new products that fail. And we've never really been able to understand why. And, the research that we put in, I sincerely believe that the people who make up those panels and focus groups and who do the surveys and interviews, I don't believe they're deceitful or manipulative of us or that they have any negative interest. And yet the results constantly fail to align or predict what is actually going on when those services and products get launched. And that's where the layer comes in, is because what we can do with neuroscience is we can actually explore what's going on subconsciously. So what we are looking at in the way the brain responds is not information that we could access by interviewing the person or by getting them to fill out a survey after they've handled a particular product or after they've watched a particular advertisement, show reel, anything like that. It's all information which goes on at a subconscious level. And that's because our brain is massively resource intensive. So it weighs something like 2% of your body weight, but it takes 20% of the energy resource that comes into your body to run it. It is incredibly intensive in terms of resources. And so all the time it's trying to do shortcuts and it's trying to find ways that it can run itself very efficiently. Now, the prefrontal cortex, the very cognitive, rational bit that you were talking about earlier, that is the most resource intensive bit. So if we are focused on giving something our attention and we are concentrating on it, that is going to be depleting the resources in our brain. So what the brain tries to do is conserve that only for when we really need it. So lots of the processing it does about what's going on in its environment, the brain is doing subconsciously. It's kind of below the radar, and it's making decisions about whether something is attractive to us or whether it's a threat to us, whether it's something that's going to nurture us and grow us, or whether it's something that's actually a threat to our survival. And it, at that very basic level, is processing everything it sees around it all the time. And in neuroscience, we can now interrogate that and we can now actually observe that in that layer, which is completely below what we've been able to achieve before.
I'm, as you were describing that, I'm seeing practical application here, even at my little, humble level of, being a capable marketer. I'm just thinking, oh, I could use this. Oh, yeah, I can see where this would fit. Because I think it is about this practicality. I mean, as soon as you talk about kind of neuroscience, I think for a lot of people, it's like, oh, that's real clever stuff. That's like rocket science. It's not for me. I can't kind of cope with that. So I think I just want to kind of reflect that and almost sort of translate it into a language that are kind of like your average kind of marketer. I'll put myself in this block. Average kind of marketer would kind of be able to use on a day-to-day basis. And while you were describing that, I was thinking, oh, I wonder then if this would be something really neat at the awareness stage in the customer journey. So just to kind of summarize it, awareness, conversion, retention, 3 stages of the customer's journey of interaction with you. Awareness stage is all about, obviously, as you say, giving that initial awareness. But then as they kind of travel through all the points of engagement with you as a brand, as a company, or as an individual, you're trying to take them to the point of conversion. And that's where they commit. So they might, part of the credit card details, or they might sign the contract, or just say, yeah, I'll have a meeting with you. So you're looking to kind of influence that journey that they have. When you described that, I thought, well, this is a really neat way of getting the understanding of how you build from initial hope through faith and trust to get that conversion. Because I always use this 3 words as hope, faith, and trust as being that kind of psychological process the customer is actually going through from the minute they first become aware of you all the way through to them becoming a signed up customer. Mm-hmm. This feels like in that awareness phase of the customer journey, this is super powerful insights, because if you can understand from a cognitive level, a subconscious level, actually what's going on and how people are being influenced, or I think probably more significantly here, not being influenced by the branding, the marketing, the communication, you're able then surely then to be able to free up some of those bottlenecks where you see people clicking away to another website, or just losing interest because you've been rambling on, or they look at the brochure and they think, yeah, it's nice, but whatever, and then you lose them in the journey, so you never get them to the conversion point. This feels like if you can get that deep understanding of actually what's going on and the reasons why, not just the what happened, but the why it happened, is that going to be a really useful kind of mindset really for a marketer to have, that they need to kind of push themselves a little bit harder to really understand the why, not just the what?
Absolutely. I mean, I think if you want the what, you can do split tests, and you can find out which of 2 is going to work, which is preferable, which leads to greater conversions, but you'll never really understand why. And that's what we can see when we apply neuroscience, is actually we can see what is going on inside the brain and how it is responding. And sometimes it's really counterintuitive. I mean, I know there are the examples of things like call to action buttons that, there's a famous study that compared red call to action button with the green call to action button, and intuitively we all think, well, green is for go, so yeah, let's go with the green call to action button. That's going to be the one that works better. And absolutely it wasn't. It was the red one that stands out more, and that's in terms of our evolutionary past. It's a color that draws us in, and it's a color that makes us very impulsive in terms of our behavior. So the wavelengths of the color actually make us quite it sort of stimulates us, so it makes us a lot more impulsive. And that's why lots of fast food chains and people like that tend to use those strong reds, because they stimulate you, they stimulate your appetite, and they sort of speed up the way that you're processing things. So yeah, sometimes what we get are really counterintuitive to what we would think as logical, rational marketers, applying all of that cognitive capacity we've got in our brain. But I think that's exactly the point. As customers, as consumers, we aren't logical and rational. We are emotional. And that is the real message with this, is the emotions speak to that subconscious level of what's going on in our brains. And those are the primary drivers of our behavior. As you say, it's the hope, it's the faith, it's the trust, it's the fear, it's the desire, it's all of those things that actually make us reach and click buy, or click send on an email, or send on a WhatsApp message. It's those that actually determine what we do. And those are things that when we apply conventional marketing knowledge, and even if we do conventional market research on them, it's really hard for people to articulate them, and it's really hard for us to make people comfortable to articulate them. Whereas actually physiologically, the body conveys it all. So down to pupil dilation, skin conductance, we can use eye tracking and have a look at how long people's stare is fixed into one particular point on an image. All of these give us really strong cues about actually how they are processing that. So we don't need people to report that to us afterwards. We can actually take it in its raw form, direct from their physiological responses, which we can measure.
So this is raising the bar of what is possible, but also probably what's expected of a marketer. Because it feels like now, if you're doing lazy marketing, you're doing all the stuff that you've always done. You don't really measure it. You don't really have the evidence. You just go with gut feel. You're just exploring, experimenting, just trying a bit of this, bit of that, and you're just doing it on your terms. It feels like that world is now gone. Because if your competitor marketer in the brand down the road, who's doing exactly what you do, starts to jump into this, the precision of your marketing by doing it this way feels so much stronger. So this is marketing, version whatever we're on to now, isn't it? Because the old version just feels, the way you've described it, just feels absolutely obsolete. It's almost like now this, you've opened this box, you can't shut the box now. It's one of those things that because it's in there, you can do this, you can't now kind of go backwards. So, I mean, what are some of the examples that, you've encountered that you would say are sort of particularly, I mean, I love the color of the call to action example, because that's quite profound in terms of, challenging our sort of preconceived ideas. And I think particularly bring in the emotional bit in a business to business marketer's sense, because I think a lot of business to business marketers often feel, oh, well, no, I'm a professional B2B marketer. We don't do emotions. And of course, it's all human beings, and they're forgetting actually you're communicating. Even if you do tenders and pitches and so, it's all about emotion. It is. It's all about relationship. But so many say, oh no, it's professional, and I have to put my tie on and be all super serious, and we're all robots. And of course, that's not true, like I do. But if this kind of human to human marketing, which I think is really what you're kind of advocating here, I mean, what other things are kind of out there as really kind of good, well-researched examples that you could tell us about?
Thankfully, as I say, there is building up to be this absolute mass of it, and there's all sorts of examples from all sorts of sectors that have had really, really profound changes that they've been able to influence. So, I mean, in terms of the color one you were talking about, we talked about red and the wavelength and how red makes us very impulsive. At the opposite end of that is blue, which calms us down and stops us being rash and stops us doing things without putting a bit of consideration into them. And Tokyo Underground system, their equivalent of the underground in Tokyo, I don't know if they call it a metro or subway or what, but they changed the light bulbs in there so that instead of it being a sort of bright fluorescent light as it had been before, it had a slight blue hue to it. So it started to just creep into that wavelength spectrum of blue tone light. And what they found as a result of changing that and nothing else, they just changed that, is they managed to reduce suicide levels by 74%, just by putting in light that stops us being impulsive, stops us being really spontaneous. So some of the things that we are learning have really big, significant, applications and consequences way outside of marketing. But in terms of actually how we can apply them in marketing, there are all sorts of lovely examples that we can see. So some of the ones that I've worked on myself, I was working with an organization who do marketing automation software. And they were wanting to find out what are the key elements that make up the best landing page that we can create. And so we came up with some research where we actually applied the same text to 19 different versions of a landing page. Now, obviously, we wanted the text to be the same so that we knew we were controlling for that, because otherwise we would get the brain's response to changes in language and wording rather than actually the physical structure of the landing page that the brain was seeing. And what the company wanted to do is actually make this available to all of their customers. So they wanted it to be something that we could research on people who were in the marketing sector. So we tried to find content that we thought would be universally exciting across everybody in the marketing industry. So if we were talking about AI, for instance, that may switch on some people in the marketing industry and not switch on others to quite the same extent. So we tried to find the same level field so we could control as much as possible for that as a factor too. So instead of doing it on what we felt was universally exciting, we did it on GDPR, which we thought it's touching all of us in marketing. It's something we are all aware of. And actually, most people at the time that we were doing this study, excitement wasn't the response that we were triggering at all. It was a sort of eye roll and oh goodness, are we ever going to get there with this GDPR thing? So what we did was we created loads of different landing pages which showed this GDPR content, and we manipulated the color schemes, call to action buttons, sign up forms, the images that we presented. On some of them, we'd put social media details. So, how many likes they'd got, how many follows they'd got, to really endorse the organization from that perspective. On other ones, we'd introduced video clips. We did all sorts of different permutations. And so what we were able to do is look at what is going on in the brain when it saw each of these. And we obviously randomized the order, so it wasn't affected by the fact that I'm reading the same text for the 14th time, so that we could again extract that. And what we learned, that actually, as much as we again overthink it, so the rational part of us says, actually, I want to put in these social sort of credibility, I suppose, checks that actually, we've got lots of followers, we are popular, we've got lots of activity taking place on our social feeds. The brain didn't like those, didn't want those, didn't want to engage with those in the same way as a much cleaner, crisper look to the landing page. Where we'd got images, so we had 3 different images that used people. One was of a lone male, don't know if he was single or not. One was of a lone female, and one was of a group. Now you've used the term lazy marketer, Neil. So this is the term that I think of as lazy marketing, which is when you have a group, and in that group you try and cover off as many ages, genders, racial backgrounds, as many different permutations of people as you can, in the naive hope of actually making everybody feel included. what we discovered is that actually these are detrimental to what's going on in the brain. When you look at the way the brain processes them, firstly, when you've got images with 6 or 8 people in, it is so naturally drawn to the people that all your beautifully constructive message is completely wasted, and the brain hardly engaged with that at all. It was drawn to the image. So from that point of view, it worked, and you got them on that landing page and they were spending time there, but they weren't engaged with your content at all. When we looked at the difference between the image of the lone male and the image of the lone female, the lone male produced far more positive responses in people's brains, both male and female participants, this is, than the lone female did. And actually, the lone female was producing quite a stress response within the brain. It was a very uncomfortable response that we see when people are challenged, when they feel a sense of overwhelm and possible inability to not be able to complete a task. Just this image, she was the only change between those two permutations that we had, and yet she created a very powerful negative response. Now, the images we used were all drawn from, sort of websites that you can get images that are what look like professional people. They look like exactly the kind of thing you're likely to purchase quite cheaply and be able to drop into your own website or into your own brochure, or to put alongside your blog. But actually, if we aren't really thinking about what we're doing and how that image is going to be utilized and experienced within the brain, we could actually be doing more damage, because in that case, we were dissuading people. We were literally putting people off, because the impression that was created by looking at that solo female image was one of distancing. It sort of distanced people from the whole landing page. So yeah, we do need to proceed with extreme care with a lot of this.
That's a lovely example, and to me it really resonates, because I did some time ago some very interesting research with a colleague of mine in Cairo, who was launching the business, or our office over there, and we were using some very, very Western centric imagery, and the picture of, as you say, the professional female on our website. She was standing there very, very smartly dressed. She had her arms folded, sleeves rolled up, good for business, good, and all this stuff. And honestly, the feedback I had was, we need a new website. It was like, how? Why? Surely not. And it was like, yep, she's being really offensive.
Yeah.
Oh, this image is actually offending you? Are you for real? It's like, look at her. She's really attractive. She's beautifully dressed. This welcoming smile. Surely this is a welcoming image. And it was, no, absolutely not. For the one thing, she has her arms folded, and the feedback was, I don't want to do business with you. And it's like, well, hold on, no, but these are kind of trendy kind of poses, where you sort of strike the pose up against the brick wall in the super cool office, and that was meant to look quite stylish. And it was like, no, she's offending us because we don't want to do business with you. Okay, well, that's a turn off. And then she said, but the worst one is the fact that she has cropped sleeves, which I hadn't even noticed. So it wasn't a cleavage thing, which would be the obvious thing. When I always raise this in training courses, people say, oh, too much cleavage showing, and she didn't actually anyway. But it was like, no, that is not the issue. The offensive thing was that actually, because she had cropped sleeves in the culture where we were trying to sort of get into, that was offensive, because she wanted to fight with you. It was like, hold on, really? This woman wants to fight with me. Look at her. How could she possibly want to fight with me? But that was the perception. And so, yeah, I can totally see this. Really, it's these little nuances, isn't it? They're so sensitive, and yet they can produce such a reaction.
And so quickly. I mean, that's you're lucky that people gave you that feedback, because, the vast majority of instances, the only feedback you get is that sales plummet, or that your bounce rates go through the roof, because people land on this page and think, oh no, and they're gone again as quickly as they can get out. So yeah, the fact that you've managed to get that feedback, and you now know what was broken about it, gives you that potential to change it. But yeah, it is really interesting. And what we did with that particular piece of research was we ran split tests alongside me conducting the neuromarketing research, so we could see in the real world what was going on, we had my results that I was achieving through using neuromarketing. And at the end of the neuromarketing research I did, we did a sort of conventional market research where we got people to fill in a survey about which ones they could recall and which ones they liked. And so we almost had sort of 3 sets of data, as it were. And what we found is that two things of real interest. Firstly, we found that the survey that people filled in was the anomaly. So that gave us a set of results which didn't fit the other 2. And yet the other 2, i.e. the split test, what was going on in the real world, and what the EEG results were predicting were the match. They fitted each other. So we could see that what was going on in terms of how the brains were processing it and what they were reporting was actually the predictor of what was happening in the real world split tests. The other thing we could see, because I got them to carry on doing that market research while they were still wearing their headsets. Actually, the headset you can just see in the corner behind me. I got people to still continue to wear that while they were doing the survey, and that was really interesting as a sort of an aside, just to see how the brain approached completing market research. And it was really interesting to see, firstly, how much some of these questions actually, again, achieve that sort of stress, that uncomfortable, challenged response that we mentioned when we saw that female image. But the other thing that I really loved was that when we were asking people to recall some of the images, what I found is that actually, as they were recalling it, their brain produced an almost identical pattern to what their brain produced when it first was presented with that landing page. So if I was asking them to recall a landing page which had the group of people on it, for instance, when they first saw that, their brain presented a number of different responses through the sensors that we use to monitor the activity. And then later on in the market research, when I asked them to recall seeing that one landing page with a group of people on it, their brain recreated to a highly significant level the same responses and the same patterns in each of those sensors that it had done the first time it had seen them. And to me, it feels like that is the start of sort of brands and associations and connections being laid down in the brain, that actually we can see that when I'm recalling it, my brain repeats the behavior, repeats the process. It's activating the same areas and the same regions that it did have when it first was presented with that particular stimulus. So you know, even at that level, you can see some really exciting things taking place when you do research.
That is profound, isn't it? Because it sets up the expectation then that if you get it wrong from the outset, there's almost no second chance, because that blueprint has kind of almost been formed in the brain at a subconscious level, and they don't know why you don't like, or they don't like your brand. They just know they don't because of something that might have happened way, way earlier, or just some association with it that it's almost like that is then set. I mean, obviously there would be techniques that you could use to kind of reset that, but we don't have the time to do that, and people won't give you the space and the attention to kind of almost, okay, reprogram me is not going to be something a customer's going to say. So it's almost like you get it wrong at the outset, there is no chance, there is no hope.
Particularly if you don't really understand which bit you've got wrong. You know, if you don't fundamentally understand where and how it is wrong, you're just changing things and trying things until you land on something that may work. And it's well, that's down to luck then, isn't it? It's a numbers game and luck rather than actually applying the science to it.
So we would do, in a previous, actually very recent podcast episode, I was talking to Sabina Rademacher, and she's very much I guess you could call it a love consultant. So she does a lot of work in communications and relationships, both professionally and personally. And we were talking about the idea of decision making based on love, not fear. And it is just that simple equation that every decision that you make, we assume, is either based on, proactive, kind of positive, desire-based, passionately based love decision, or it's based around fear, trying to mitigate fear in your world and trying to reduce chaos and, things that are unexpected.
Yeah.
It feels then, from the way that you're describing neuromarketing, that what we're trying to do here is to get this deep understanding so that we can actually, rather than, so I'm still looking at this bigger definition, rather than trying to manipulate, coerce, influence people, actually what we're doing is we're trying to understand actually what's going on from their perspective so that we can hold their hand and reduce the fear but increase the love.
Mm.
That feels like actually what's going on here. Would you
Yeah.
say that kind of reflects where you see this thing kind of being rolled out in the future? If you say this is a big growth kind of area, would you see it is about being kinder, just being, more helpful to customers rather than to try and, get more people into the sales pipeline and make more money?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's often the way that I'm, when I first engage with a business to come in and support them, that's often what I say to them is it's about actually being able to remove barriers, remove bottlenecks, and being able to really facilitate that customer's experience of engaging with you. So yeah, it's really about finding those pivotal moments where you can really make what sometimes feel like quite small and often, at least consciously, imperceptible changes that can actually have very significant results in terms of that business's engagement. So even if you don't have thousands more people coming in the pipeline at the top, actually what you can do is sort of facilitate, sort of almost lubricate that process so that customers come through it, and you will lose less along the way. So actually your conversion rates go up. Even if your inquiry rates don't change at all, you can actually look at ways that you can support customers, and just presenting the right information to them in the right way that enables them to feel confident in the decision that they are making, and actually enable them to feel that there's a connection with this organization. They get me. They understand what my life is like and what my days are like, and that I'm not that folded arms smart person leaning against a brick wall on the website. I'm actually, scraping in the door, having just done the school run and, feeling a bit frazzled, composing myself momentarily before launching into the next meeting. If that's a message that resonates with you, that's going to be something that connects you at a far stronger level to that brand than an impression that is very professional and competent, but may actually feel like it's out of my reach, and it's too far as an aspiration for me to feel that they understand me.
It just feels like this completely advocates human to human marketing. I think we
Totally.
should get
Absolutely.
away from B2C, business to consumer. We don't want to be consuming more. We want to be
Yeah.
saving the planet, for goodness sake, but also business to business. Businesses don't communicate. It's humans who communicate. And so this
Yeah.
feels like this is really getting back to the real kind of true essence of, thousands of years ago when, the Romans were doing marketing, and they were probably the very first ones to begin the concept of
Yeah.
marketing, sort of literally 2000 years ago. Feels like, because that was at a human to human level, feels like this is where we're back. But whilst the bar is being raised from the technology assisting us, the simplicity of neuromarketing to me sounds, from the way that you've very eloquently kind of described it to us, it just feels it is super, super simple, really. It is
It
about
is.
human connection.
Yeah, and yes, you're right. I mean, the technology is phenomenal, and it is enabling us to see and interrogate things on a level that are just beyond anything we could have predicted even 10 years ago. But the bit that isn't progressing and isn't changing at a phenomenal rate is us, is our brain. I mean, I often use the phrase that we're sort of running on caveman software, because our brain is evolving, but it's evolving at such a slow pace. So we are not equipped for the life we live today. Our classic stress response, for instance, where your palms start to sweat and your mouth goes dry, and your pupils dilate, where everything physiologically changes as soon as your brain and your amygdala in your brain identifies something as being a threat and triggers that hormonal change in the brain and triggers the stress response. That may have served us 20,000 years ago, when our stresses were very physical threats that we had to either take, fight, or flight. But actually, the stresses of today about, increases in energy costs and, actually, all the stresses that we've been through with the pandemic, we aren't equipped for that, because part of those stress responses actually shut down resources in our brain. So I've said our brain is incredibly resource intensive. If we are put in a stress situation, the resources get diverted to muscles and to things that are hopefully going to equip us better for that physical need, rather than clear thinking and any processes that we may want to undertake cognitively within our brain at that time. So actually, if we are permanently stressed about money and about health issues, our brain is operating on semi-shutdown. So the way that neuroscience is understanding brains has enabled us to see that actually we are working with a brain that is doing its best, but it's evolved, it's in our evolutionary past. And so, a lot of the things that we might like to think about the society we live in and we work in today isn't actually reflected in the organ that is driving our behaviors and is making our decisions. And that's why sometimes I think, when you go back to the insane behavior about loo roll shortages and all of that, you look at it and think, why are people doing this? And actually, it's hardwired into us. It's a very basic survival instinct that we have about what happens when resources are scarce. And so it enables us to really see and appreciate that as sophisticated as we've become, and as sophisticated as our cultures and societies have become, and as sophisticated as neuroscience has become, the oldest technology we're using is the technology that we're actually studying. It's, that's the bit that is the anachronism.
I think you've whetted the appetites of every single marketer possibly on the planet, but certainly the ones listening to this. Your work here is done. Although I don't think that's true, is it? Because I know that you do a lot of research. So if somebody was interested to find out more, because there's so much, I mean, we could literally talk for days, not just the rest of today about this. If they want to keep in touch both with you and with the kind of the research that you and colleagues are doing in this area, because there's so many little snippets that we can all learn from, and I'm certainly signing up for this 100%. So I'll be your biggest advocate here, because I think this is so powerful. How can people kind of keep in touch? How can people subscribe to Katie Hart?
Thank you. For anybody that wants to, probably the best way to do that is either follow me on LinkedIn, and I am there and quite vocal there. Or the other thing is, if you go and look at my website, which is katiehart.co.uk, on there you'll find all sorts of insights that I share, but also I tend to try and do some research through the website. So you'll find each month there is a new piece of research on that website. So if you look onto the website and go onto the research area, you can very quickly take part in whatever the study is that's going on. And once you've done that, if you drop me your email address, then I'll send you the results afterwards. Because what I tend to do is do the research online on the website, and at the same time get some participants into the office so we can actually see what's going on inside people's brains as they are conducting the research. And then in newsletters and things, I'll then release the findings from both, so you actually get to understand a bit more about your own brain in this wonderful process too.
Wow. So everybody, we have opened the box on this. You can't close the box, or even if you do, it's going to open again, because now you've opened it. There's only one way forward. Katie's just raised the bar in marketing circles for sure with this. So thank you so much, Katie, for your time today, because I think we all needed to hear this. This is times of chaos and uncertainty, and who knows what's going to happen in 6 months' time, or even 6 weeks' time, as I think you put it before we started this conversation. And it is so true. So I think the more that we can just stay hungry to these kinds of opportunities to be kind and to do things in a more ethical and better way. And this is what this neuromarketing is all about. I've kind of learned a lot here, because it's kind of repositioned it for me, and I'm sure for lots of others. So thank you again so much for your time today.
You're welcome. It's been lovely talking to you.